another episode of those smack-talking guys. Full of opinions on games, music, culture, and current events. These guys cover it all while humiliating each other. This is Generation Flip. Don't forget, make sure to drop a like and subscribe. And now, crapping it up, here's your hosts.
What's up, guys? Thanks for tuning in. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a great show today. Good episode today. With us, you obviously know my boy from San Jose, Mr. Big Brown.
What's going on, everybody? Hey, man, I'm really excited about today's show. We got some good information. We're going to let the cat out of the bag. We're going to bring it to you. We're going to hit you between the eyes. I'll tell you, I'm excited. We've been talking about it since last week. A good friend of mine, Peter, we got on the show today. Peter HEITMANN, he's what you'd call a conspiracy analyst. He's got a lot of good information, a lot of good details. And the one thing I love about Peter is he likes to bring stuff that's factual. We're not just pulling stuff out of a hat. We're not just, throwing it to see if it sticks against the wall. One thing I love about Peter, he's a straight shooter, man. And a lot of his stuff that he brings to the table is legit. He's got documentation proof of it, and he's coming out with a website later this week. We're definitely going to post that information because I know a lot of people are going to ask a lot of great questions, and this is one of the ways to get my that information out to my good friend Peter that can help everybody on it. So without further ado, we got Peter right here. Peter, say hello.
Yeah, how you doing, man? I'm excited to be here. I think you guys are doing a great thing, and I can't wait to watch it grow.
No, it's going to grow. We're excited too, man. We really are. We've, we started this out just to be a little platform for me and Flip to have a good time and bring a lot of good information to light. And a lot of stuff that's out there that on our previous shows, we feel that it's very important. We have a good time with it too. But we bring some important topics. We bring out factual topics. We horse around. We have a good time. But more importantly, we like to bring out information that our fans want to hear, our people want to hear. And I know they want to hear this because I'll tell you, we talked the other day, me, Pete, and Flip, and we sat there, and I'll tell you what, our minds just went.
I mean, there's so much. There's a lot of intel there and information. And if you probably already know some of it, you probably heard of it. There'll probably be new information out there for you, so take it with a grain of salt. Again, you guys, thanks for tuning in. If you haven't already subscribed, please go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Drop a like if you like it, be entertained. Share it among your social media groups, and come back from time to time. Hit us up, in the chat. We're live chat later on if you can't. Join in the comments. Hit something up in the comments. But without further ado, again, let's get into the topics here. Peter, thank you for jumping in here, man. We definitely appreciate it. Let's start with where you started and how you got into all this conspiracy analyst, being that particular field.
Sure. I think it started probably at least 15 years ago or so. I had my original book that I bought that really opened my eyes was by Richard Hoagland. It's a book called Dark Mission, and there's a lot in there that's interesting. And so that took me down many paths to try to find out what was myth, lore, and what could actually be documented and be factual. And so it led me to really focus on two areas. One is all of the development technologically from 1950 on up in Boulder, Colorado, where a lot of the UFO technology, a lot of the UFO lore sightings, many paths combined with New Mexico happen. And the second is what's going on in space. And so whenever I talk to somebody and the subject of the UFO comes up, I like to present it like this. So let's pretend that 1,000 years from now, there's some sort of cataclysmic event, and most of civilization's wiped out here on Earth. Right? It's happened before; it'll happen again. But pockets of civilization will eventually rise up, get together. There'll be things in nature. There'll be maybe some books that are left over that survive, and they'll eventually invent a motor, eventually invent a rocket, and let's say 2,000 years later, they land on the moon. What will they find there? Well, they'll find evidence of an ancient civilization, which is us, the Russians, and now the Chinese, as well as Israel, India, and other European Space Agency partners. And they'll also find lots of ancient technology that we left on the moon. Our landers, cameras, all the different types of things that we didn't want to bring back with us.
Right.
Well, that's exactly what we expected to find when we went to the moon, and that's what we did find when we went to the moon. We found evidence of an ancient civilization, and we found ancient technology that had been left up there. And so if you start there, you realize that once we got to the moon, NASA led the charge to quickly sort of invalidate the moon, to paint it as a dead, lifeless, sand pit, if you will, and there's nothing to it. Well, today we know that almost all the building blocks of life are on the moon, and the moon is going to be key for us to enter into deep space, to try to become what I call a Type 2 civilization. So a Type 1 civilization is what we are now, where we've mastered our domain, Earth, and now we're looking to become a Type 2 civilization to wander out into space to perhaps, develop a civilization on a moon or a planet within our solar system. However, we suffer from the human condition, right? So we're not supposed to be out in space. So we have to come up with new technology that is artificial, that blends the human element with a robotic artificial merge, if you will, that allows us to have something that can survive in space. And so if we take that as a starting point, then it makes sense that if we're not the only ones in the universe, that, or even the solar system, that this is the type of program that would happen with any emerging civilization, where there would be, I call them the others, for lack of a better term, who are helping fledgling civilizations grow, advance, and I believe that they've always been a part of us here on Earth, whereas a lot of people talk about how did they get here? How do they get here? They've always been here. And so my journey starts shortly after World War II. I'm not going to, focus on Roswell, because that's a whole, black hole, if you will, to go down. There is a lot to that, but my interest starts shortly after that, which would be 1950 up in Boulder, Colorado, which was pretty much a nothing. And they built a high altitude observatory up there, Harvard did. And they had their own just massive amounts of telescopes and all kinds of instruments. And they collaborated with governments from all over the world, including Russia.
I have a quick question for you.
Yeah.
You're bringing up telescopes and stuff. Nowadays, because you got the telescope, the Griffith Park over here with their telescope and stuff. And I guess people have they're around the world, or actually around the nation, have their own facility where they have their telescope and they can see outer space. And I guess that's how they determine or detect, flying objects or what's going on out in space. And then they report it. They report it to the NASA, or is that how the chain of command goes, or is it NASA?
Well,
obviously, NASA has their own satellite and all that stuff, but
sure.
independently wise, I mean, they just phone NASA, hey, I spotted something and here's the coordinates, check it out. That's basically what happens.
Well, let's see. So NASA has slowly faded into the background. They're still doing projects, especially with the Helio Sun investigation with Venus. And they actually have a huge deep space telescope that's parked at one of the Lagrange points in deep space. So, getting out of the atmosphere is what you want to do to be able to see properly. But NASA's taken a backseat role, and everything's become sort of private enterprise. And there's a consortium of billionaires,
Right.
that it comprise $1 trillion entity that is actually harvesting right now stars in space. They're harvesting, rare elements, if you will. And it reminds me of a very interesting thing that happened about maybe 7 years ago. I'll find the article and I'll give it to you so you can post it. The Senate and the Congress, who really can't agree on anything, and it's very difficult for them to get a bill passed, unanimously voted to pass a law. This was, I think, about 8 years ago, that bans this group of technologists from enslaving aliens in space. Literally is on the law books that prevents us from going out into space and capturing, maybe very a civilization that was where we were when we were hominoids and we were, sort of walking around hunter-gatherers. What does that tell you? I mean, that tells you that they wouldn't. A lot goes into passing a bill. They wouldn't be passing a bill if there wasn't something to that. So we're about to move from becoming a type 1 civilization. Type 1 civilization is you master your own domain, Earth, and we're going to become a type 2 civilization where we're going out into space and we're going to try to, bring our prodigy to a moon or to another planet out there. I don't know if you guys saw last week, William Shatner went up into space at age 90. So a lot of privatization of space is going on. And that allows, I believe there's, last count, there was at least 40 ocean-based launch pads that are portable. So the idea that we're going to be able to see something that's being launched and track everything those days are gone. That was what NASA was doing. So NASA still is in the background funding some types of things and licensing others, but it's become a private game. And
well, they got SpaceX, they got other $1 million,
Richard Branson and whatnot,
right? Around the world who have the money to develop their own unique, observatory or NASA station, if you want to call it, or whatever facility. So they developed their own facility out there. But quick question though, recently I saw in the news, maybe it was last week or something, but recently I saw that there was a asteroid that was going to, just nearly missed Earth's atmosphere. So, I mean, it's we should have known ahead of time before this was happening. It should. I think the public should have. The media should have came out and said, or the government should have came out and said, "Hey, there's an asteroid heading our way."
Yeah, it happens all the time, and there's a huge fund. There's a huge consortium of people that have worked for a couple decades on this issue, and I believe it was 2014 or so, or 2013. That the European Space Agency launched basically something the size of a washing machine, billions of miles into deep space. And the goal was to land it on a moving comet.
Okay.
And this comet was going 40,000 miles an hour. And it took about 12 minutes for a command on a computer in Europe to be sent to deep space to have that washing machine-sized spacecraft adjust to try to, you have to, in order to land on something, you have to go past the orbit and you have to come in. We landed that washing machine on an object billions of miles out in deep space that was going over 40,000 miles an hour.
Without any altercations?
No, it bounced a couple of times. And these are the types of things we're trying to see what can happen. There's all kinds of engineering, physics, gravity, things that go into, because we're developing, to directly answer your question, we're developing countermeasures that will hopefully be able to split up or minimize those type of asteroids that are coming. But they're all coming from the, not all of them, but a lot from the Kuiper Belt. and it's endless. So there is a huge effort and a lot of money behind tracking that.
So,
As far as letting the public know, that's a whole different story.
yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting. And by the way, Hypnosis, thanks for tuning in, man. It's interesting because it's like, Armageddon, the movie Armageddon.
Sure.
You got these asteroids coming, and it's like the media or the government's not really doing a good job notifying the public. You know what I mean? Hey, this is could hit our world.
Yeah.
And
well,
give us a heads up on it. I guess they don't want to panic. You know what I mean? I guess
Exactly.
they don't want people to panic.
Yeah.
I get that.
Yeah. There's that, and let's go back to assuming that they did find something on the moon, which would then show that there was something other than us definitively. What would be the reason that they wouldn't want to tell us? Well, a lot of people say religion. People wouldn't go to work, pay their taxes, but it really is as simple as, and they decided this in 1963, by the way, for us. There was a study that the Brookings Institute did that basically decided that when they went out into space, there's a good probability they'd find something. And that if they were to tell us about it, the problem would be mathematics, engineering, physics, chemistry, everything, as we know it in the science world, would be wrong. And if you look at us, just Pluto being demoted from a planet caused all kinds of problems in our school books, people complaining, what is it? Is it real? Is it not? So these decisions have already been made. But I think that if you watch the progression with movies, media, disclosures, releases, they've gotten past the point of, making us feel comfortable with it. It's almost to the point where nobody really bothers to care, even if they were to tell you, because we're so interested in these other things in our daily lives, a Snapchat or a text. And I'm hoping that our children that are coming up are going to be, they have no doubt that there's something else out there, right? No doubt. They have the opportunity, and we have the opportunity to be able to have those children study and go to school for things that will make a huge difference in the world going forward.
Right.
But we're not quite there yet, right? Which reminds me of, we talked a little bit about energy and helium-3.
I remember this.
So this is why others would have come to the moon in the past, to mine helium-3, which is something that, if you look even this year, there's already a company that's been defined and assigned to mine helium-3 from the moon.
So let's rewind a little bit so that the viewers who tune in a little later understand what helium-3 and what the moon is providing us out there. Once you elaborate.
Sure. So helium-3 would be something that would be used by any advanced civilization in their spaceships, etc. It's a natural element that comes from the sun. It's just massive stored energy. It comes from the sun, it bounces off our ionosphere, and it's settled in the first, 5 meters or so of the regolith of the moon, because the moon has very little atmosphere. So it's sitting there ready to be mined, and it will be turned basically into a gas that is fusion energy. So it's nuclear energy, but it's fusion. Fission is what we've used to date. Fission has explosions. It has all kinds of, ramifications for safety issues. Whereas the fusion technology can be enclosed. And my understanding is a few metric tons of helium-3 could power New York City for 100 years.
Wow.
So it's almost free energy.
Wow.
Right? But the people, just like the people that won't disclose things to us that we would think was important, they're right now working on a critical mass of helium-3 before that will become the energy source, and a paradigm shift will happen, just like as we're going out into space to become a type 2 civilization. Helium-3 and the change of moving from petroleum to fusion energy is absolutely imperative. And if you go back and you look at the movie Moon, which, by the way, was written and directed by David Bowie's son, He goes by a different name. David Bowie was very big in space. The very first, this movie was at least 10, 15 years ago. The very first minute talks about helium-3 and how it changed the world, and that's the whole reason that they're on this. So one last thing there is NASA had a patent in 97. Has a patent. It's on file. It's public record. You can get a hold of it. That for low Earth orbit transfer of helium-3 gas. And there's a strong possibility, don't have any factual basis for this, but there's a strong possibility that as the space shuttle was maturing, the helium tanks that were on there got bigger and bigger. And once they got up to the space station, they shot those out into space. There's a very, reasonable possibility that those were actually shot to the moon, and that there's some sort of a, mining operation that's been going up there for a couple decades now. Again, no proof of it, but that's just something that would be logical. Because what's illogical is that we spent billions of dollars, had over 400,000 people involved in getting us to the moon. And once we got there, we played this game of, forget about the moon. We don't need to worry about the moon anymore. But today, every single major country around the world is racing back to the moon.
Because why?
The moon is the future, not only for mining elements, but also for launching into deep space. It has billions of trapped tons of gas of water in the South Pole, and that water and other elements will be used to launch our rockets in the very near future to Mars.
But why the government is not talking about this crap, right? Because it's a conspiracy.
But it's also highly profitable. And so anything that's highly profitable is going to have the same group of people, that have been, let's use the word cock blocking all this stuff for decades.
Well, let me ask you this: with all the technology, maybe I should say this: is there a portion of the moon that hasn't been seen yet, or does the moon rotate also?
No, it has a lock, but here's something that a lot of people may not have been paying attention. China landed on the far side of the moon in early 2019. And they couldn't have done that without our help because we have the repeater satellites. But it's an important point because on Earth, all of these countries, Russia, India, and China, we all have conflicts. But up in space, we're all equal partners working on specific areas. For example, the Japanese were in charge of high-def mapping the moon. And if you extrapolate that into Mars, which is the future that's currently happening now, what's fascinating about Mars is, in the last year, there were 4 rockets that were launched almost simultaneously from China, the U.S., United Arab Emirates, the UAE,
But what I think, Peter, is that all this, they're finding more and more materials out on the moon. The moon has pretty much a decent amount of resources for Earth to
habitat.
I guess it has enough resources for us to look into probably medicine. You know what I mean? To help us down here in Earth. You know what I mean? Build materials. It's probably high advanced and rich in water. You know what I mean? So
this is a great book. It's the biomedical results of Apollo missions. And it's fascinating. This was written in the 70s. And a quick story about that is Buzz Aldrin kept wanting to tell the scientists and the military people about what they saw that was following them, tracking them. And nobody would bring it up. Nobody would talk about it. So in the biomedical areas, when they talked about food, is when they allowed them to let all that out. So, yeah. So it's not time yet. If that if that makes sense. It hasn't been time. It's not. So there's two possibilities. One possibility is the moon was still and is still occupied by whatever civilization is up there, mining up there, watching, like we are now. We have spaceships that are parked at these Lagrange points that have clear, unobstructed views of Earth. There's ones that are behind the moon near the sun, where millions of spaceships could park. We're looking at it. We're looking at another Lagrange point right now for a civilization in space to have our first space colony.
Well, I mean, SpaceX is trying to send freaking people out there. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure they're not the only ones, but it's just like you said. The guy, the 80-year-old, what was it? William, what's his name? The one that just got sent up to the space.
Oh, William Shatner.
Yeah, William Shatner. I mean, they're sending people. I mean, if you got the money,
right? But he's 90 years old.
That's what's going to happen. You know,
he's 90 years old. So think about that.
That's just weird. I mean, I guess they want to send the old people up there in case they kind of die or something and find out, hey, how we reached this distance. You know, that's as far as we can go right now. You know what I mean? But
I think it's based more on survival rate, though. Yeah. I mean, listen, this guy's. It's not like before where they used to make the astronauts have to, physical fit, and they have to do this, they have to do that. They're finding out probably more research that they can send the average Joe up there, and by them sending an average Joe, lets them know that hey, we can be done. But getting back to my question earlier, does the moon rotate? The only reason why I was saying that, if they're mining and they're doing activity up on the moon, couldn't I buy a high power telescope and see shit going on? Or
there's only a portion of the moon that you'll ever see from Earth.
Okay, that's what I meant. That's what I was getting.
It's an interesting lock that, I mean, the whole setup of the moon. If you ask any lunar scientist, they'll say that if you add it all up, the moon shouldn't exist. It doesn't make sense. They still don't know exactly how the moon got there. They have theories, right? That it broke, that a Mars-sized planet hit Earth, broke off, coalesced. But there's also a possibility that somebody carefully placed that moon in that exact orbit at that exact degree. Because if you move 1 degree, our atmosphere, where the moon is, our relationship to the sun, we don't have tides, we don't have seasons, we don't have what's necessary for man to exist. So it's almost impossible that was all accidental. And again, these are things that, as we understand more and more about space and who we are in the universe, these are things that we will do if we get the chance. And so getting back to Mars real quick, all of these spaceships that we talked about that launched last year, they all arrived at the same time in Mars orbit, with the exception of, I believe it was the US arrived 2 days later, or China arrived 2 days later. And so if there are others out there, I think that we were looked at as a type of civilization that's dangerous for space. We still war, we still just chew up resources. So we have to make a lot of changes too, I think, in order to become part of whatever is out there, whatever community exists. And I believe that there are all kinds of planets and different types of what they call Trojan stars that exist that we haven't discovered yet, right here in our own solar system. And so one of the things people always talk about is, where are the aliens? Where are they if they're here? Well, these Lagrange points, they could park hundreds of thousands of spaceships up there. They could just sit. The Lagrange point, if you look it up, is where gravity cancels and you can literally, park. Some of them you have to adjust like a telescope. You have to move it a little bit here and there, but it's an interesting concept. And one last point is, when you talked about telescopes on Earth, I was at a SETI conference about 10 years ago, and I accidentally walked into the wrong room after lunch, and it was a room that had all of these donors, and the subject was, they're asking for their money, and they're telling them what they're actually going to use it for. And there were two things. One was to look for what's called a Dyson sphere, which is a theoretical sphere that would contain all of the power and electronics that you would need to power your planet, but you would keep it off Earth, off the atmosphere, so that if you were hit by a coronal mass ejection or an electronic pulse, you wouldn't have everything destroyed. You'd have a backup. So that's one. And the second one was this huge, the size of an aircraft carrier ship that would orbit close to the moon, that would have these deep space telescopes that would be looking far beyond, what I believe our most powerful telescope in space is the Webb telescope, named after James Webb, who's the man that got us to the moon. And so, again, there's so much going on, but it's privatized and it's out of the public view. But it's all happening very rapidly, and I think we're ready for it. But, if all of a sudden Richard Branson from Virgin Galactic or SpaceX was to announce we'll give free one-way tickets to Mars, I bet you the line would be around the corner, and down the street and across the lake. So it's coming. It'll happen in our lifetime.
I want to say one word. Space is very interesting. It's out there. You know what I mean? So there's so much to explore in space, so much to know, or even get into knowing space. But let's talk about one thing, and that's conspiracies. Let's get into the topic of conspiracies here. Let's talk about, I want to talk about, and we all know, the situation with the Zodiac killer. You're familiar with the Zodiac killer? We had a backdoor conversations with the Zodiac killer. Give me your input on it.
Wow. So I have to be really careful here because the website that I'm putting up will be specifically identifying, but I can't tell you this. The reason the Zodiac killer has never been identified or succinctly linked by DNA or fingerprints is because it was a trio. It was a trio, three of them. And I'm not going to name any names at the moment, but they were musicians. One was a producer, one was a writer, and one was a guitar player. And they had several recording studios. They were in Vallejo, Mill Valley, Morro Bay, Los Angeles. And these individuals started in 1962. The first killing was in Oceanside. It's a taxi cab driver. And I'm probably going to say too much here, but what really nailed it for me was they left clues for somebody that's crazy enough as I am to spend all this time to find it. They left clues in the public record. And that clue is a recording that they made within, I think the longest one was 4 weeks before or after each murder. And they never published the record, but the title had exactly to do with each murder. For example, the second set of murders was in 1963, was in Santa Barbara, a couple on a beach, a couple of high school students, and they were tied up and murdered. The name of the song is Beachbound. So these three group of people, one of them was a retired intelligence officer. Another one was the son of one of the most famous media people ever. And the third one was an individual who was in a mental institute in 1959, and by 1960 he was a A&R recording guy for MCA Records. So what I will talk about in the website is how hypnosis was used to basically turn these individuals, and it was a group that they had out there, into becoming compelled to kill somebody. And if you hypnotize somebody correctly, you can almost you can become the father figure for them. And if you do it rightly, they'll want to go out on their own and keep committing these crimes in order to satisfy whoever their handler is. And there was no way that they could be caught.
See, Zodiac Killer was way before my time, but, you know, growing up, hearing stuff over the news, obviously the movies and stuff like that, movies, it's just interesting. What do you think that obviously some of these killers or most of these killers have something in common? Obviously Richard Ramirez, Night Stalker.
Yeah.
I mean, you got Ted Bundy. You got, Manson.
Richard Ramirez used to hang out in a garage that one of these three individuals owned in the 70s.
Are you serious?
And, I'm dead serious. The main person who probably actually committed the murders, he died in 1980. Head-on collision. Struck by a car going the wrong way on Santa Monica Boulevard in L.A. The person who killed him head-on ended up getting 3 months probation.
That's it?
So, that's it. And, the reason why they felt confident they couldn't be caught is because so there was these early killings, but then from 68 through 72, these murders were more about scaring the public and more about, conditioning than anything. You throw in the Charles Manson murders and you'll hear people talk about, right after that happened, everybody bought a guard dog, a gun, an alarm system. Well, same thing with the Zodiac. Every parent out there for a period of time wouldn't let their daughter go out late, was worried about, people being killed. And my website, Zodiac Bus Driver, is about, and how I came across all this was a woman in Woodland Hills who wrote a letter to a judge in a trial for some murders that were attributed to the Zodiac, naming the one individual, and she was a bus driver, and the Zodiac was obsessed with buses and kids in buses and shooting out tires. So that's how it started, and I will, have all this up in about a week because it's been years in the making, and I had to wait until the last one died. The last one is now dead, which makes it a lot easier to put the story out.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm getting word over here in the chat box. I'm just.
So what I'm doing too is I'm looking at the Zodiac Killer, just information, Wikipedia. It says victims. It says 5 confirmed dead, 2 injured, possibly 20 to 28 dead. Claimed to have,
It's probably a little bit higher than that, because what I want to emphasize is the Zodiac Killer. Let's put that in quotes. It was a counterintelligence operation. It began when Ronald Reagan, governor of California, let all the mental patients out of the mental wards, put them into the street. And a large percentage of these people had been experimented on for years in these mental institutes, in these prisons. And so once they were out, now they had research subjects to try field operations, to see how the public would react, to see how far they could push it. And it's a shame because nobody's ever been held accountable.
Yeah. That's some of the stuff that really blows my mind. I mean, and then it says claimed to have killed 37 from California to Nevada.
We're talking about Zodiac? We're talking about the Zodiac Killer?
Yeah.
See,
yeah.
I mean, it's weird. I don't know, the mind of a serial killer. You see that movie on Netflix, you got all these document on movies on Netflix and stuff like that to go watch. The Son of Sam.
Yeah, that's a very interesting. That's
and I'm from New York, so give me a little bit on that.
So Son of Sam was had to do with a lot. It had to do with I don't want to use the word satanic ring, but an occult group that was murdering people. And there's a documentary that just came out recently about it. It's a 6-part documentary that goes in, and there was a gentleman who was able to prove that very clearly, and the police and everybody didn't want the evidence because it would muck the case up, that different people were actually at the crime scenes when they happened. And so the person who we're calling Son of Sam, he was at these crime scenes and he did commit 1 or 2 murders, but he was part of this larger group. And the Son of Sam had to do with where this gentleman lived. And they lived on this weird kind of like, haunted house type thing that had a tunnel that led about half a mile down the road. And they found these satanic rituals, dog slaying, cat slaying, all these horrible things. But it didn't fit. It didn't fit the story. And they already, finally had this wrapped up into a bow. Everybody was scared to death out in New York. And so they went with the story. They went with the story that he heard a dog, right, in his head.
And this was, what year was Son of Sam? That was early 80s? Was that the 80s? 70s?
I believe it was the late 70s. I don't have the date.
Yeah, 1976.
Yeah.
I was born in 77, so I mean, I wasn't,
But the story is not as it appears. And so there's an excellent documentary out there. It's a 6-part series. It just came out. And it's pretty frightening. It's pretty frightening to see how the authorities will cover things up if it doesn't fit the timeline.
Right.
It doesn't fit the story.
Right.
And
That's one of the reasons why Zodiac was so successful, is they knew they couldn't be caught. I mean, the authorities, to some degree, knew who they were.
But could it be that they had, was it copycats? Were they copycats involved?
I don't think, not copycats, but they may have, there may be some murders they had nothing to do with, but they still wrote those letters, right? And the whole idea of Zodiac wasn't to kill, these people. It was to test to see if we could get these people who had been programmed to go out and do it. But the real goal was accomplished by scaring the crap out of everybody, right? Scaring the crap out of everybody. And if you look at all of these types of murders and all of these types of, conspiracies, almost all of them happened between 68 and 78, right? Mm-hmm. And they're still using what they've learned from all of this behavior modification, from all of these field operations. They're using it against us because they know how people will react. They know what scares them. They know how to get to the point where we are right now.
So
which is that the people do not know what the truth is. Nobody knows what's right or true not. And so we're going to look to the government and the media to tell us, instead of thinking for ourselves.
Right.
In a digital age where we have so much information,
the time is 5.
People are actually like,
PM.
I'm not too sure. You could just put it in front of them in black and white, and they're still not going to be sure. And I'm fine with that. But I have at least 150 different circumstantial evidence points that point to this group, and it's overwhelming. Now, there's no way that anybody can definitively say that they killed anybody unless you do DNA and fingerprints. But their fingerprints exist. One of them was in the Air Force, and so it exists. The other one is somebody who continued to be a counterintelligence operator until he passed away in 2019. And he's behind, and it'll be up there, he's behind nearly every conspiracy that started in about 67 from the Illuminati on. And there's no file for this gentleman in the FBI, the CIA, anybody else who did these types of things, there'd be a file on him. So there's no file, and the reason for that is because he worked for counterintelligence. The other gentleman, his father was the drug czar for 8 years under Nixon and under Ford. And so the power was too great, and the need was too strong. And all of these people add up to what I call the ties that bind. the ties that bind individuals that keep it all together for decades. But they're all gone now. They're dead. And so what's left is us having this psychological and mental mess where we don't know what's real, what's not real. You go look on the internet, the first 100 things that you see are disinformation, right? And that's the tool that's used now. It isn't going out and killing somebody. It's giving them information that's real. And then once they get enough attention, you feed them information that's wrong, and they lose their credibility.
Right. I have a question for you that's coming in here. I got a question. Says, let me ask you about the ARC programs. What do you know about the ARC program?
ARC?
ARC. That's what they're saying. That's what it says.
A-R-C, A-R-K?
ARC programs.
Not familiar.
Okay. Yeah.
Now let's shift gears, because this is what I want to know.
What do you want to know?
I want to know about the UFOs. That's what I want to know. I want to get into UFOs. You know, I know Peter's got a lot of great information, but Pete, tell me your favorite UFO story. I mean,
Sure.
People are infatuated with UFOs. I know I am. Do I believe there's another being? I do believe it.
Absolutely.
But tell us your favorite, UFO story.
Sure. So my favorite UFO story takes place in 1955 in Russia, where Senator Russell and some of his aides and a couple of military attaches are just finishing up a fact-finding and an exchange mission in both Helsinki and parts of Russia. And they're on a train leaving. And all of a sudden, the porter comes in and tells everybody to put down their window shades. These people don't. They're in a private car. All of a sudden, Senator Russell saw two classic, massive disc-shaped UFOs coming very close to the train, coming over. He brought other people in to go look, and I think there was a total of about 6 people that saw this. When he got back to the U.S., he marched into the Air Force office and said, I just saw what you're telling me doesn't exist. And so UFOs, I believe, where the technology came from is debatable. Could have come from others, could have been, something that was left, something that was shown, something that was channeled down to individuals. But it's clear that in the 30s, the Germans possessed some very unique knowledge that allowed them to develop things that then we acquired after the war, brought over here, brought over all the Germans and Nazis. And again, I call them Germans because, like I said, they were Germans before they were Nazis. Brought all their best scientists over here, and we picked their brain, and they played little games with us by giving us some technology. But they were waiting until they were to be utilized properly, and that didn't happen until the Russians got the satellite up, the first Sputnik satellite. After that, after some failures by the Navy, all of a sudden the Army got the call, and Wernher von Braun and his team were ready to go. And then they launched our first satellite after, I think, 1 or 2 failures into space, and the rest is history. So Wernher von Braun and his group got us to the moon, got us to space. And I got to tell you, I believe the Apollo 11, the Saturn V rocket, has over 60 million parts in it. And not once did it fail. Not once did it fail, which is unbelievable. Even if you were to have a 1% fail rate on things, that would be what? 6,000, parts that fail. And so there was something very unique about the knowledge that they had, but we didn't use it until the late 50s. Now, the Russians also acquired German scientists, German technology, and one of the Horton brothers. And this is very important. The Horton brothers were the ones that designed the flying wing. And the flying wing was actually what was first seen before Roswell up in Washington. I forget his name on the top of my head right now, but the first person who actually said, I saw a whole cluster of unidentified objects moving. He didn't draw a disc. He drew a wingless, looks like a wingless aircraft. And so there's a lot of speculation that a lot of the UFOs that we saw in the 50s were Russian, and that were coming from the north, constantly coming across here, and were technology that we had as well, but they developed first because they didn't waste any time after World War II developing, whereas in the US, we waited until the Russians got their satellite up before we called these people who had the unique knowledge. And so once that happened, that's why Boulder, Colorado was so important. A lot of this was moved up to Boulder, out in the middle of, nowhere up high. And they had the ability to study up there the sun, the upper atmosphere. And they went almost unnoticed. The High Altitude Observatory discovered solar flares. They were shooting up balloons, rigs, to study the upper atmosphere. And they had discs, manless discs, that they dropped and were able to maneuver between Colorado and New Mexico. So most of the UFO sightings that you have seen in the 50s and 60s is either our technology or the Russians' technology. There would be no reason for an advanced civilization to buzz by here and take a look. Why? Because again, they've always been here. They've always been here, and they're probably up on the moon watching constantly. And I think that it's a shame that there were several times that different people were going to kind of disclose a lot of these technologies, but the CIA, who didn't even exist, by the way, when Roswell happened, they weren't called the CIA. The CIA didn't happen for a few months later until they developed the National Security Council. And so the CIA used UFOs and the whole concept of UFOs as a counterintelligence operation against us. It was good for business. It was good for getting funds to develop things because there was the thought, the Russians have it, we don't, we got to move on it. And so that's why every UFO story has to be looked at very closely. One of my favorites is also the Phoenix Lights.
I was
The
just going to
Phoenix
ask
Light-
you that. Yeah.
The Phoenix Lights was the result of development of technology since the 50s that were balloons the size of aircraft carriers that could go Mach 10, which is about 7,500 miles per hour. And so there's actual video of this in hangars. It's staggering to see these and to imagine that they could fly that fast. But what they were doing is they were developing these to replace rockets. It was too expensive to bring everything up to space. They wanted to have the ability on these giant balloons. And when I say giant balloons, just one piece is the size of an aircraft carrier.
Amazing.
So I think the Phoenix Lights was something where the technology either faltered, it wasn't able to get out quick enough, or they have some sort of a cloaking device that failed that allowed the public to see it.
So
7,500 miles an hour.
That's a lot. That's fast. That's fast.
Mach 10.
Right. That's super
It's
fast.
crazy. And that was 20 years ago.
Right.
So whatever they have now,
It's probably 4 times as faster.
I imagine.
So I got a comment in here. So there, I guess you ever seen or heard the or watched the conspiracy theory with Jesse Ventura?
Yeah.
Okay,
Absolutely.
so I do remember watching an episode about the reptilians. Someone in here in the chat, Hypnosis, is asking, so what are the reptilians and what are the grays?
Well, there's different, I don't know if they exist or not, but what the reference is to 2 different types that have always been drawn or people have seen, people that are abducted see these gray aliens. We're all part reptilian, right? We have reptilian parts in us. So I don't know exactly what they are, but they are 2 examples of the classic alien that people would envision in their head. And by the way, one of Jesse Ventura's episodes features one of the Zodiac killers. And he doesn't know it. They don't know it. The public doesn't know it. It's the one about the underground facility in Kentucky. And in, I forget where exactly. It's somewhere in the South, where we have this whole underground facility that, you know, in case of a doomsday. And so Jesse Ventura, yeah, you'll notice that you can't find those shows anymore.
No, I mean, I did see it. I actually was looking at it this morning. Amazon has it for like $2.99. You can check all 3 seasons. I think he came out with 3 seasons. It was on
you can
Hulu.
buy it.
Right, you have to buy it. Yeah, it's not on public television. You can't watch it in cable or anything like that. But it was a great series. I binge watched the whole 3, and let me tell you, it's very interesting topics and stories he's got there. I remember one.
Yep.
I could be wrong. I don't want to spoil it for the people out there, but I got to mention this. But I think the reason why they canceled the show was because one of the reporters or one of his investigators was murdered through the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
Am I right?
Yep.
So they had to cancel it because it was getting too into it. You got to check it out. I mean, if you haven't taken a look at it at home, for those who are watching, take a look at Jesse Ventura's Conspiracy Theories. I'm going to tell you, it's on Amazon. You can watch it on Amazon for like $3. You watch all 3 of his seasons. And I'm going to tell you, he's very interesting stories he's got in there. Left me mind-bound, I swear. Have you seen it, Brown?
I haven't. I've seen the previews, but I never really got into it. I wanted to see it, but you know, I like I said, this stuff right here intrigues me. It gets to me, and you know, it's just one of those things where knowledge is power in my mind. And you know, getting back to what we were talking about earlier, like you were mentioning, you know, the public should know. I don't think the public should know.
Well, there
need to know.
There are many things that you shouldn't know.
Well,
that
here's what I say. Screw that.
Listen.
That's a damn conspiracy right there, hiding.
If I had my little button, man, I'd be saying, "Hell no! Hit that button for me."
Oh hell no!
Listen, we just had COVID, and these motherfuckers bought up all the goddamn toilet paper. Could you imagine if you told these guys, "Hey, we got a little asteroid coming to the hitting the Earth"? Could you imagine how many people would go out and buy shit, create pandemonia, just don't pay mortgage, screw everybody, leave their wives? I mean, think about it. So you can't do that. You can't create that.
It would take 4 days before we would turn on each other.
Exactly.
I agree. It would be chaotic. It'd be chaotic. But don't you think that the people have a right to know what's going on? And if, however, like you explained to yourself, however they want to take it, they you know, with a grain of salt. Because now you're talking about 40s, 50s, 60s, you know, back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and all this stuff is coming out now. All this stuff's coming out now.
That story about Senator Russell didn't even come out till 1986.
Hey, that's like I tell my kid. That's need to know basis, and you don't need to know.
That's all about conspiracy, my man.
Well, that's what we're talking about today.
That's all about conspiracy.
Listen,
I'm gonna tell you, that should be open to the public. Hey, I pay my taxes. I want to know what the fuck's going on in the world. Now, I got a comment in here. One of these guys comment here, Dot Connector, has asked, what is the world controlled, or how is the world controlled? And I would tell you, this world is probably controlled by the billionaires out there, man. For the
Rockefellers.
You know what I'm saying?
Just say it.
Pretty much. That's probably where they control this. Not just our government, but you got all the other governments out there in different third world countries. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but you're talking controlled chaos. If there's chaos, they're in control of it. That's how they manipulate us and make money off of us.
Right.
Controlled chaos.
Cash crisis, it's called. There's more money to be made in crises than there are in good things happening.
Exactly.
Start selling stocks, whatever it may be. If you've got knowledge beforehand that some catastrophe is going to happen, they're going to take advantage of that. But I would counter that by saying that there's lots that they have disclosed, but people just don't pay attention. They miss it.
That's that's what I was getting at, Peter.
Yeah,
is that
I agree.
from the time from the 60s, the 50s till, you know, it slowly comes out, but it's just, I think the government does that in a control, environment. They do that so that they won't cause any chaos or whatnot. But then time passes on, right? Time passes on.
Right.
We all grow, things, develop. And I think what it is that the government's saying, hey, you know what? If someone comes out, let's just say I was watching a show yesterday about this air pilot, okay? He saw UFO and he came out with it. Right? The government's probably gonna, hey, this is top secret. We can't let this out, whatever. We're gonna keep an eye on him or whatever. I mean, I think that's bullshit. Okay.
Are you talking about the pilots that saw these crazy UFOs from like the last 10 years?
Just recently.
Oh, no, they just let the info out. It was the information just had to get released because I guess one of the presidents recently said, they have to undisclose this stuff. Right. And that's how it
should have been.
Right.
Years ago, it should have been like that years ago.
Well, like Peter was saying, there's technology in there that's probably ours that we're checking shit out. You know,
a lot of that the pilots are seeing. So it would make sense that you would want to test that technology on the best military in the world, which is us, to see how they would react, to see what they could do as far as countermeasures. And each one of these sightings that happened, in full view of some of these aircraft carriers, Special Forces, Special Operations team landed shortly after. Just happened to be in the area, I guess, to confiscate all the computers and all the data. But that still sits in the subconscious of our minds, forever. Yeah. That I think most of that is a purposeful release. To what ends, I don't know. But with holograms and all the different things that they have now, that they could easily deceive us and easily, use it much in the same way that the Patriot Act or something was used to take away some of our rights, to sort of
they'll just, like you said, they'll probably discredit you.
Yeah,
they'll probably discredit the pilot that probably saw this stuff. Comes out with it, in the media, and then the government's probably hoping, if we come out with this, people are probably not going to be interested in it. They don't care. They just don't give a shit.
So there was a Pentagon study, $26 million or something. It happened under Senator Harry Reid during the Obama administration. Before he left, $26 million was given to the Pentagon Department of Defense to study this. And what was only released recently is that Robert Bigelow was the entity behind this, Bigelow Aerospace. And so that tells you right off the bat that this whole thing is a counterintelligence operation. To what extent, I don't know. But Robert Bigelow was the gentleman. You asked the question about a pilot seeing a UFO. Who did they report it to? Well, after the Condon report in '69 took the government out of the business, for a large part of the 70s and 80s and 90s and early 2000, Bigelow Aerospace was who you were to call. So if you called the police, you called the Air Force, you were a pilot that came in FAA, they sent you to Bigelow Aerospace, a private organization. This is the same gentleman who owned the Skinwalker Ranch for a while. The same gentleman who has his own private space station with inflatable rooms. He's the same gentleman who has all the licenses through NASA for the inflatable habitats that are going to be used on the moon and Mars. And so there's this relationship that, again, is private, working with the government and working with sort of a hidden hand. So you don't know who the sponsor is, ultimately.
Yeah. Well, looking at the chat board here, Voodoo Alpha, thanks for joining the show, baby. Don't forget to subscribe and like. His comment is aliens are real.
Yes,
I'm with you. I know they are. I definitely know they are. And he made a comment also about 5 major banks control the world itself. Probably right within the certain region of that, and government controls both profit and protection.
Sure. So again, they've always been here, and so they're among us. They're among us, and it's gotten to the point with robotics and artificial intelligence. I think it was about a year and a half or 2 years ago at the United Nations, a Japanese woman got up to talk to a security group in the United Nations, and after an hour, she disclosed that I'm a robot, and nobody knew, because what they have now is they've gotten pretty close to robots, 10 years ago that looked like humans, but it's only thanks to these things like Snapchat and all of these things where people are constantly uploading pictures,
all the social media,
that they can get the facial intonations, the tics, the types of nuances that a human would use to make it look more like a human.
Right.
And so they're probably among us, and who would know?
Just going back to one of the chat here, they did mention the reptiles. So Jesse Ventura did bring that up. He had a story in there in his show about the reptilians, and they had the third eyelid, and you could see that. So it's almost like you're saying. They're among us. They're among us, but do they want to be? Do they want to be out there? You know what I'm saying? Do they want to be out there for people to? You would probably freak out. Oh, my neighbor's a fucking reptilian. Come on, you just don't do that. It's like you're not gonna know, and I don't think they want you to know just yet. That's just for their own little circle environment. You know what I mean? To know. But do I believe in aliens? Yeah, I believe in aliens. I think they do exist. Have I seen one? No, but I would love
an alien. An alien, by definition, is anybody who's not from this planet. When we went to the moon and walked to the moon, we were aliens, right?
Right.
So, and we're about to become aliens too as we move out, towards Mars, etc. So, again, everything that we're about to do or doing, is stuff that 30, 40 years ago, people are like, oh, that's crazy talk. Well, we're doing it now. And so give it another 1,000 years. And imagine if there's a civilization out there that's 100,000 years ahead of us. Just imagine where we'll be if we survive. It'll be staggering.
Well, this is my theory.
We won't be human anymore. We'll be like a digital version of a human, but
Well, here's one of the things that blows me away, because I always sit back and I analyze this thing as when I was a younger kid, a younger man. I'm 53 now, but when in my 25s and 30s, even into my 40s, I go, fuck, man, it can't get no better than this. Right? You think about it. It can't get no better than this. And then all of a sudden, fucking Google comes out. Apple comes out. These things start to evolve, and you start going, holy shit. So like today, I would never say that.
Yeah.
You're not going to hear me say, oh, it'll never get better than this. No. Oh, yes, it will. It will.
Sure, in time, I believe. But like they said, back in this, okay, so I remember back in the 90s, they didn't develop the cell phone, but they did have a cell phone out there. I remember there was like a block car phone, or you know what I'm saying, back in the early 90s, when they had that block. And then they went and had pagers. I remember because I used to have pagers, and then it went from pagers to cell phones.
Beepers.
The beepers, so it went, you know what I'm saying? So they did evolve. And then you had what? You had cassette players. You had the A-tracks.
Yeah.
Back in the 80s. The A-tracks.
Beta stayed in there a little bit, and then they got kicked.
You know what I'm saying? Then you went
then it went to discs. Then you went to discs.
And now you don't even see CDs. Everybody's downloading it off the internet now. MP3s and MP4s formats.
How about the cloud? How about the cloud? The cloud. I thought it was amazing in the 80s when you could order a fight on cable, and they would send a beam into your television, and it's on like that. Right?
I know, dude. That's what it is.
I can only imagine.
Well, the internet itself. Back in the 80s,
Well, I guess now, but I guess one cat invented the internet, and he was from Switzerland, I think, or a European country, and he gave it up. Could you imagine if that guy didn't give it up and said, you know what, for whoever clicks on this thing, they got to pay me a penny?
Yeah.
Could you imagine that? But the guy relinquished it, and I want this to be free for everybody in the world.
Yeah. But
look what it did.
All of those things, all of those algorithms, right? Algorithms were something that when we were kids, nobody knew what an algorithm is. Algorithms run the world now. Everything doesn't work unless the algorithm works. Right. We're helpless without it.
The Illuminati rules this world. That's who rules this world.
So if
I'm
there,
serious.
if
The
there are,
Illuminati rules this world, man. We can't see them. We don't know who they are, but they're there.
they are, and if they are, and if this is a natural progression for civilization, then it would make sense that perhaps, just perhaps, that Google, Snapchat, Twitter, Facebook, all of these things were sort of looked at. If somebody was to help them develop it, hand it to them, they're, oh, this is awesome. But just like fire can be awesome to make us survive and heat, or it can burn the house down, you know?
Exactly.
And so, what if a lot of these social media stuff were Trojan horses that allowed the others to not even have to be here anymore?
Right.
They could sit out in deep space with their killer servers and computers and just monitor us on a very subtle basis on a daily need and make adjustments. For example, when Trump was running for office, there were Twitter accounts that were run by AI computers. Right. Millions of people arguing with a computer, had no idea it was a computer, and that computer was utilizing what everybody writes, like delete your account, all these little nuances that would make it seem real. That already is happening. So, I mean, I mean, there's a strong possibility that technology has been used against us, and we don't know until it's too late.
Yeah, I'll tell you, one of the things that I love to listen to Elon Musk, and that guy might be an alien. That dude's pretty. I'm not saying anything bad about him, but I'm saying he says he doesn't sleep much, like 2 hours a night, and his mind does not stop.
He has special knowledge.
Special knowledge, and not only that, when they asked him, "What are you most afraid of?" You know what he said, Flip and Peter? AI.
Yeah, robots.
AI. Artificial intelligence. Don't fuck with it, he said, and he told the government. As a matter of fact, that's it. He told the government, your biggest problem is AI.
Well, that's because it's called the singularity, and it's coming. Some people thought it would already be here, and the singularity is when technology evolves to the point where it moves past humans, and so we're almost there. Where just being human isn't going to be enough. You're going to have to be enhanced neurally, etc., or you're going to get left behind, and you might as well go to an island in Indonesia and just, where there's no electricity, because when that happens, that's when everything is going to, kind of massive paradigm shift.
Yeah,
and it's coming. Don't know when, but it's coming.
Well, from the sci-fi fictions and movies and stuff, wife and I watched American Horror Story, and they're having this alien episode right now, and it jumps back to like the 50s and stuff, and it's just technology. You know what I'm saying? It's like, do you think by any chance, and it probably so, obviously the aliens have more technology or better sophisticated technology than we do, and hey, President, we're going to offer you this technology here, but it's going to cost something. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, isn't it interesting? I mean, nothing against the U.S. workforce because we're the best in the world, but isn't it interesting how we dominated electronics and computers for so long?
Well, I think the Chinese.
50s, 60s, 70s.
No, we passed them.
We
surpassed them. Oh, yeah. By far.
Do you see the industrial buildings they have over there? They're so high tech.
Now,
did you see their subway systems?
Yeah,
did you see their subway systems out there?
Yeah.
What do you think they got that information from?
Not from us, because we don't have it over here. I haven't seen no damn subway system like that. We're trying to build that long train right now. It goes from San Francisco to over here. Barely right now. What are you talking about?
Don't be talking shit about the bullet train, baby. That's the bullet train.
Well, in America, we can't have the bullet train because what about the employees on the bus? What about the unions? What about the drivers?
VTA.
I mean, what are they going to do? So that's the type of thought that the U.S. has, whereas France, Japan, it's about efficiency.
A rail system.
Germany, efficiency.
Yeah.
We're not there.
Well, I could say this. I feel that New York, the East Coast, is more in transit, is more developed than out here. Their
Boston,
technology.
Yeah, but there's a reason for that.
Austin's got the best in the world, I think, or at least the country.
Yeah, but there's a reason for that.
What's the reason?
They can't afford cars like Cali, baby.
We got too much
Hey,
smog and too much.
We live in the
crap
land of
Cali,
milk and
brother.
honey, baby. No, I do have to say, I do love what blows me away more than anything is when my son graduated from West Point, I stayed in Manhattan, right by the Grand Central Station.
Okay.
What a modern marvel the Grand Central Station
Yeah.
is. Dude, I've never seen 4 or 5 layers of car tracks going every which way,
Right.
and it is
With a purpose.
amazing
Right.
Yeah.
the purpose of the Grand Central Station.
Oh yeah.
If nobody's ever seen it, you always hear it on TV and you see how the structure is built. That thing has been there for I don't know how long, 50, 60 years?
Right.
But
Right.
the infrastructure on that thing still works.
Yeah.
And it's a fucking modern marvel.
Yeah.
You know how the transportation goes. It don't matter. Wherever you want to go, there's a train that goes from there to there.
Right,
I
and
mean,
go to Germany. If you're a minute late, that train's gone.
oh yeah,
It's gone. You're not going to sit around and bitch about, I can't believe it's gone. You have to be there. It's
yeah,
clockwork. Because it's
Yeah.
important. It's important to that culture. Here,
Yeah.
it's not so much. I mean,
Yeah.
Well, there's so much to talk about.
Yeah.
I mean, this topic can go on and on and on, and there's so much intel out there. You know what I mean? But Peter, I really thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah.
Give us your
we're
input.
gonna do it again.
Yeah,
we're gonna do it again.
We'll definitely have you come on again. You know, for those at home, you know, make sure you know like and subscribe to it if you haven't already, of course, and share it with your social media. You know what I mean? Because and drop a comment every now and then. Stop by, say hello. We go on the air, you know, every Tuesdays 4:15. We have open topics Friday. We're gonna have an open topic this Friday. Hopefully, probably be pre-recorded though. We might go live Thursday instead of Friday. I'll
Yeah.
keep you guys posted on that. Brown's got some business to attend to on Friday, so we might go live on Thursday instead. But anyway,
yeah, and I'll send you some documents that the viewers can look at on your site.
sure. Guys, check
kind
out
of
Peter HEITMANN.
Know what I talked about. Yeah.
He's got. Well, I'm gonna link his link into the description. Check that out. You know, partay in that. And you know, again, we thank him for coming on to the show. You guys like, subscribe, share it on your media. Again, Brown.
Thank you for
From
coming in,
San Jose.
Voodoo. Yeah.
Peter
Stay
HEITMANN,
human.
appreciate you for coming on the show, guys.
Stay human. That's simple. All right. Thank you.
You guys-
Be human, baby.
The third eye,
right.
baby, the third eye.
Right there.
Hey, and like us Mexicans say, stay brown.
Stay brown, guys.
All right. Talk to you soon, guys. Bye now.